Because Congressman Brad Wenstrup's in studio today. Congressman Brad Wenstrup, thank you so much for coming in. I always enjoy being able to talk to you face to face.
Yes, good way to wrap up the week here, isn't it?
Nothing happened this week.
Nothing.
And there's nothing going on. Hey, real quick here, I understand you're going to fire your press secretary since artificial intelligence can write a wonderful review of you. Joe Strecker on the break asked ChatGPT to do a positive, sort of a press release announcement about the accomplishments of Congressman Wenstrup. And I read it out loud to Congressman Wenstrup because that's pretty much spot on. And it was a great review. It talked about your accomplishments, what you focus on, what you've been given credit for, and instantaneously. It took like 5 seconds for it to generate that.
Yeah, so, there was nothing in there that I would yell, that's a lie.
Isn't that wild?
They really had it. They didn't go into detail. It was generalities, but they were accurate.
Yeah, I didn't ask him to do one on me because I don't think ChatGPT even knows who Brian Thomas is. So,
well, there's so many Brian Thomases. Well, yeah, I personally know 3. So,
yeah, see, there you go, there you go. So it may confuse. Anyway, it is frightening reality. I know you were listening to Tech Friday's Dave Hatter on that topic as you were waiting. On to the reality we all has to face. Last time I checked, Congress Republicans do have a majority, but it's a four vote or 5 votes.
We have 222. You need 218 to get something passed.
Right. And in spite of the fact that the Democrats control the Senate and the executive branch, you're able to get together. McCarthy has been given a lot of praise for being able to herd the cats and get you all to agree on something. You passed that proposed budget, debt ceiling increase. And that blew the Democrats' mind because they kept expecting that there was no way the Republicans are going to join and get together and present an offering. So it forced the hand. It forced them to come to the table. Biden was saying no up until that moment in time.
Yeah, he was no all along, and then even then he waited. He was hoping for something else to happen.
Schumer
you think of the alternative. What happens under the alternative if Nancy Pelosi is the speaker and if we don't pass a bill? Then there's just the push, clean debt ceiling. That's what you get, and nothing else is changed. So it's really been pretty amazing. The strategy has been there, and this is a big strategy too. We were talking off the air. Next is appropriations, but let's stick to this.
Yes. Yeah,
we'll stick to this, and we got the bill passed, and all along McCarthy was telling Biden, asking him to come to the table. And I remember Biden's spokesperson saying, no, the president just wants a clean debt ceiling passed, blah, blah, blah. Oh, he's always willing to discuss deficit reductions and things like that, but he wants a clean debt ceiling. And I was on CNN. I said, well, apparently he can't walk and chew gum at the same time because we got plenty of time to do this.
Yeah.
So let's do it. And he didn't, leaves the country, this and that. But, at the end of the day, they had to come to the table. People don't recognize that. And what's amazing to me, and I've been there 10 years, and I've been there when we shut down the government over this and everything else, is, we only make up barely 1/6 of the whole process. So we are 1/2 of 1/3 of the government. You have the House, the Senate, and the White House. And we're barely 1/2 of that. So I think we did pretty darn well considering we got the president to the table. The Senate did nothing. Why? They didn't have the votes to pass a clean debt ceiling.
Exactly.
Schumer came out and said, well, we're not going to take up their bill because we want a clean debt ceiling. Well, then vote for that. You have that ability. Have a vote on it. You didn't have the votes for it, so the Senate never did anything. Matter of fact, last week, they weren't even in session.
Right.
So,
well, and it's illustrative of the fact that Democrats have a problem in their hands herding the same kind of cats as the Republicans have to do. You got the AOC crazy commie wing of the Democrats, and they didn't want to cut a dime. In fact, they want to increase spending. And, of course, there are the mansions in the Democrat Party who, of course, would agree to some cuts in return for getting a pipeline. But that is reflective of the dysfunction of the Democrat Party. They're all lockstep in unity over there, and so they couldn't agree amongst themselves on where it was going to go.
No, they couldn't. But, at the end of something like this, Joe Biden basically caved, if you will, right? Because he said, I'm not going to negotiate. We just want this. So he caved. So what do the Democrats do, and they do this well, is they come out and tout a victory.
Yeah, we had this conversation this morning and yesterday. Listeners like, oh, listen to them. They're so happy about this. No, they're not.
No.
They're trying to gain some political advantage over something that is definitely a defeat for them. It's not a wave the flag Republican victory insofar as they did have to increase the debt ceiling. And everybody's saying, well, it's unlimited. This thing, we're going to be $4 trillion in debt, 2 years from now, compared to now, because Republicans didn't hold fast on that. And that's when I say, but wait, 12 appropriation bills. You go back to regular order, and that presents an opportunity, 12 different ones, to cut. You don't have to spend more. And in the appropriation process, you can limit the spending and reduce it, and arguably accomplish through those vehicles what you were not able to accomplish during this past process.
That's right.
Am I wrong on that?
No, you're right. So we passed that Limit, Save, Grow Act, and that was there to cut out of control government spending, and we got a lot of that. Look, over 60% of Americans said they want us to do something to decrease spending,
right,
as well as pay the debt. They get that, because the alternatives are horrible for the United States of America, for our economy, for our treasury, for everything going forward if we were to go and default.
Yeah, we're not going to renege on our obligations.
No, we've never done that. That's kind of a given, and both sides of the aisle said we got to do this, but we got so much done. Just look at all the things that matter to people. If we had defaulted, no Social Security checks, we won't be able to pay our military, our dollar loses its status in the world. It goes on and on. It's not
credit rating falls, increasing our borrowing costs.
Exactly. So it's not perfect. There's no doubt about it. This is divided government, folks, and I think we did pretty well for considering we had divided government.
Well, and something also that resonates with the American people, generally speaking, is the work requirement, which is in there for able-bodied people who are receiving government handouts. I just never understood that. And the left is like, no work requirement. And I'm thinking, you're the party of from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. If someone has the ability to work, and yet they're the ones like Bernie Sanders living in an ashram and not helping out with the household obligations and chores and growing food and whatever, they're just receiving, they're going to get kicked out of the ashram because they're not playing by the rules. Listen, if you've got ability, then provide that ability. Work, or at least get the training. You fall into a category where you qualify to get training. In other words, you're not cognitively impaired. You're not a disabled veteran. You're within the working age group. All of these things which say, dude, you can't just, hook yourself up to the umbilical cord of government and take without stepping up and providing some, offering some work in response.
Yeah, that was a big first step. I mean, I'm glad we're a country that has safety nets. I think we should be proud of that in some ways. The way we administer them, however, leaves a lot to be desired. And that's just one example. And for people that are sitting around, they're 40 years old, have no children, have no physical disabilities, have no problems, and they're just collecting, that's a wrong system. And so this is a start on that. Look, this is the largest deficit reduction package in American history. Now think about that.
Well,
and we got a long way to go. The bar is low, right?
It's really, really low.
Yeah. So look, we got in this agreement. No new taxes. Joe Biden, who wants more taxes, that's off the table. This is good stuff for us. Anyway, and as you pointed out, it limits the growth of government. So if appropriations aren't good, you still have to cut 1% over the next 6 years. And I hope we do even more, obviously. But so many good things. Clawing back money that we put out there during COVID that's just sitting there.
I know.
Sorry, it's coming back.
That's another great thing. Obviously, a little bit too much money went out into the world during COVID-19, and we're struggling with inflationary realities as a consequence of that. And if the money's not being used, because, you think of all those cities out there, Democrat-controlled cities primarily, that racked up so much debt and pensions underfunded. And I just had this sneaking suspicion when all this money flowed out, well, this is the bailout those cities been waiting for. They're going to somehow magically parlay that COVID-19 billions and billions of dollars into reducing their overall, being in the red budget realities. So taking it back is a good thing.
Yeah, there were so many good things. Some people voted against it because it didn't have everything they wanted in it. Well, this is just step one, and I get that, but they weren't against anything. I saw people in our conference stand up saying, "Congratulations, Kevin McCarthy and your team. What a great job you did." And then for politics, these are Republicans, voted no. Even though they said, "I love this," and then they voted no for politics. And, you know,
their vote,
we got work to do.
Their vote was not critical. And if they were the deciding vote, like Joe Manchin found himself in a position to be, that brings about leverage and, of course, can also force members in line when they otherwise want to pay lip service to something political for a gain like that.
Yeah, it's called Hope It Passes and Vote No.
There you are. 716, 55 KRCD Talk Station with a whole hour with Congressman Wenstrup. We will get to, Ukraine and, of course, a whole lot of others, including with the student loan vote the other day. Plenty of subject matter topics with the Congressman. A very, very happy Friday. Congressman Brad Wenstrup in studio for the full hour. Talking about some of the details in the debt ceiling increase vote. And, of course, we did the conservative side of the movement did get quite a few things in it. And one of the things we didn't address in the prior segment, Congressman, and this is so important, permit reform.
Right.
If you apply for some project, it has to be, the environmental reviews have to be not only completed by just one agency as opposed to the 9 gazillion potential agencies that might try to throw a roadblock down in front of it, claiming they have the right to inspect the project or review from an environmental standpoint or otherwise. One agency does it, and they have to turn it around in, 2 years?
Yeah, well, it speeds it up. I'm not exactly sure if it's 2 years, Brian. I can't remember if I read that.
Don't quote me on that. I seem to recall reading that. So.
But what it does, it speeds up the permitting, which is a huge part of cost on everything. So we can reclaim American energy independence in a lot of ways because it's the permitting that was keeping us from doing more and more under this administration.
I mean, look at the XL pipeline, for God's sake. Every time that thing was getting ready to be approved, some new environmental claim was launched against it. It's like, how in the hell can you can't do anything?
We hold ourselves back in so many ways. And in the name of what? I don't know. Power, I think, more than anything else in Washington. But, and it's going to help with infrastructure. It's going to help with the bridge. You know, I spoke at OKI, Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, about 400 people at lunch, and everyone's excited about the bridge. And I'm sure they all knew that I voted against it. But what I reminded
Not against the bridge, you voted against the broader package that was in it.
Exactly. Because for a few things, one, I pointed out to them that I have been working with others to create a sort of a commission, if you will, to highlight the bridges that we needed to replace in America. And this, Brent Spence being one of them, said I was for it all along. I did hear on the radio one morning here in Cincinnati, oh, yeah, Wenstrup says he's for the bridge, but he voted against the bill. Well, I pointed out that I did all these things, but here's why I was against this final bill. One, there were other things in it. They had nothing to do with the bridge and increased our debt tremendously over a 10-year period. And I highlighted inflation and permitting. I said, with the permitting, it takes 4 years. You know, that hit on the radio said, oh, I bet he goes to the groundbreaking. I hope I live to see it.
Yeah.
Because the permitting takes forever. So we had reforms in there in the form of amendments to speed up the permitting. That got rejected. That was another reason I voted against it. I said, and with inflation the way it is right now, the longer this takes, which I've heard for 20 years before I was ever in office, the longer it takes, the more it's going to cost.
Yeah.
Especially with inflation. So this is a big boost for us, actually. We got this in there, and that should really help the infrastructure projects that we do want.
Well, and the other thing that we got in there, and God knows why, and it goes back to your point a moment ago, which is, well, I don't know why these policies even exist, but that pipeline that Joe Manchin was behind, that thing is almost completed, right? I mean, isn't that the one that's like 90% complete?
I think it's pretty far along.
Yeah, and yet there it is. It's like the end's in sight. The lights at the end of the tunnel is not a train coming my way, and no, we're going to put brakes on that. The Democrats seem to be on a green suicide mission.
Well, that gets into a whole nother topic of what's a religion and what's not. I mean, I pointed out in Ways and Means Committee, they're going on, it's life and death, man. We've got to do all these climate change things. I said, well, let me show you this study by the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration, 40-year study, government entity, and it said the fact that we have cleaned up the air so much over the Atlantic Ocean, it has warmed the oceans, creating more hurricanes and storms. In the Pacific, where the pollution has gone up,
From
the
China.
hurricanes and storms have gone down because now we've just put like a magnifying glass on the earth. And I pointed out, look, I can prescribe a medicine that might kill the bacteria and virus in you, and that's a good thing. But if it kills you too, it's not good. We put sunscreen on, right? Why? To protect us from skin cancer. But at the same time, we want to get some vitamin D from the sun. You got to have the right balance. And so, it's very possible you do too much and you do more damage.
Well, amen. And of course, depriving yourself of the best source of energy that is carbon-free, nuclear, is also as dumb as anyone could come up with. And that, I think, is the best illustration of the insanity of the left and these climate activists. Okay, how about something that produces an abundance of power, virtually unlimited, has very little waste? I mean, the global combined nuclear waste can fit on a football field, I think 4 feet or 5 feet deep. So that was the Yucca Mountain situation. We had a place to put it all. It never produces any carbon, and you don't have to worry about using up thousands and thousands of acres for windmills and sun farms. No, we're not going to do that. Why? Well, I think the answer is because it does produce an abundance of power. And it does answer all of their questions. And they don't want them answered. 725, KRCD Talk Station. Stick around, more with Congressman Brad Wenstrup. Friday to you. We got St. Anthony of Padua Festival coming up this weekend. They're going to be joining the program at 8:05 after the top of the hour news. It's already on my blog page if you want any information. And first time ever on my blog page, Joe put the QR code for that event up. It is safe to scan. If you got a scanner for your phone, scan the QR code. You get the information about the St. Anthony of Padua Festival, and I think the menu as well. 55KRC.com for that. In the meantime, Congressman Brad Wenstrup in studio for the full hour. I know you want to talk about COVID. You've got all the information about COVID and school closures and that and everything. I guess I do want to ask you, because I brought this up this morning. Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, is making some very strong, insistent demands that Ukraine should be allowed to be a part of NATO. Give us entry into NATO right now. They're asking for a security agreement. If they're a member country of NATO, that we owe an obligation to send troops in to member countries that are invaded. So wouldn't this buy us World War III right out of the gate if we let them into NATO? I mean, isn't that what that means? Boots on the ground, American soldiers and British soldiers and German soldiers fighting against the Russians and, perhaps more fundamentally, the Chinese Communist Party as well.
Well, first of all, I don't blame Zelensky for wanting.
Well, you got to ask, but no. How about no?
Yeah, the answer is, why don't we get this? Why don't we get your skirmish settled, everything get back in place, and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah,
and look, the Eastern European nations, especially that have become part of NATO, that used to be part of the Soviet bloc, you better bet they're awfully glad that they're in NATO because of the aggression of Putin. Again, I don't believe that this is the Russian people per se. It's Putin and his ego, and he wants the return of the Soviet Union, all those things. But I don't blame Zelensky. But you're right. If that were to be right now, then yes, everyone's in. And really, I would like to see more of Europe helping Ukraine, because they're the ones at greatest risk right now because of the aggression of Putin. And that's who should be helping the Ukrainians themselves, in my mind. And what we're doing is, what are we spending the money on? What is our end game? How do we hope to bring an end to this thing and have a free Ukraine?
Because
I
we
haven't
don't
seen
have
that.
one.
We don't have that.
There's no plan.
And that's the pushback right now. So, again, in the same vein, don't just say you want to be part of NATO. Tell us how you're going to win this thing.
Yeah.
And what it's going to take to win this thing. That's a whole nother story.
It seems to me they've been fighting this for so long, and you keep hearing the casualty numbers, and it's like the fog of war is never more pronounced than you read somebody who reports how Russians have advanced and they've wiped out X number thousands of Ukrainian troops, and the same day you read another outlet that says, no, the Ukraine forces have pushed back the Russians, and 100,000 Russians are dead now. Who knows? You can't tell. But at some point, I would think Ukraine probably would run out of people and bodies to fight the war before the Russians. I don't know what the population ratio or comparison is, but this battle of attrition is going to go as long as we keep funding the war.
There is a difference to see. The Ukrainian fighters are willing. the Russian fighters.
That's how we lost Vietnam.
Are being brought out of jail.
Yeah.
To go fight the fight. I guess it's more than the Dirty Dozen, if you remember that movie.
Oh, of course I do. Lee Marvin? You kidding me?
Jim Brown.
Oh, Jim Brown. Yeah, the late great. He just recently passed away. Yeah, he was the one that dropped all the hand grenades on
and took off running. It was beautiful.
It was that was a great movie. All right, let's take an early break, and we're going to dive into some of the other subject matters. Congressman Wenstrup has a list, and we're going to get to that list here. And Congressman Brad Wenstrup in studio, working our way through as many subject matters as we can. Going to move over to COVID. He's on the subcommittee looking into COVID, and I just mentioned off air to Congressman Wenstrup as we approach this topic. I don't if there's another pandemic that's announced, some lab leak or whatever, I don't think the vast majority of people are going to pay attention to it anymore, or at least maybe take our so-called experts seriously on it. Because I mean, looking back with hindsight, and I know it's 2020, but we were pretty much lied to all across the entire spectrum of COVID-related things. My best illustration, at least my favorite one, the whole mask idea, and Fauci early on had acknowledged, and back in 2020 in February, that they don't work. And then it became this mandate, everybody, including babies, wearing masks. And I still see them today. I went grocery shopping over the weekend. My wife, there's an employee at the grocery store wearing a mask. There's a couple of people walking around, and they're wearing these cloth masks that never, ever, ever did anything. My joke is like throwing sand at a chain link fence. Yes, some of the sand will be blocked by the chain link, but the vast majority is going to flow right through it. That was a lie. And so many people were miserable and continue to be miserable because they're operating under the erroneous assumption that that piece of cloth over their face is actually accomplishing something. But that's just one of many. Congressman?
Well, I've always felt, just on a simple note, that if I'm breathing in my own carbon dioxide over and over again all day, that doesn't help. And if I get COVID and I'm trying to expel this virus, I take it right back in. So
there's that.
I think that those are consideration as well. But I'm really honored, actually, to chair this select subcommittee. Kevin McCarthy called me and said, "I'd really like you to chair it." I had been studying the origins of COVID through the Intelligence Committee since day one.
Oh,
yeah. Discovered a lot very quickly. But I look at this as an after-action review, and we got to have some lessons learned and let America know what those lessons are that we've learned of what we did right, what we did wrong. Look, at first, this thing was novel for sure, and people were flying blind. There were a lot of things we didn't know. I started looking into with another doctor during the lockdown saying, how do we treat this? How do we diagnose this? What blood work changes? And we were finding out a lot of things. But in the meantime, we also found out that we had been providing grants. And in 2015, the research published that showed that Ralph Barrick in North Carolina with Dr. Zhengli Shi in China were creating one virus out of two that made them more infectious to humans. So the capability has been there. So now I'm concerned about bioweapons, right?
Yeah.
Of course. But along the way, just think about this. Early on, one of the things we said, if you've had COVID and recovered, you have antibodies.
Yes.
Go donate plasma. I remember the Cincinnati Enquirer doing a story on a guy who got somebody else's plasma that got him right through COVID. He said, I felt so much better once I got those antibodies. That's natural immunity. That's infection-acquired immunity and sharing it. We dropped that subject.
I know.
For some reason, public health just dropped that subject. It's not part of the equation. It's vaccine only. This is a big mistake, one that we have to recognize. And I remember an interview I saw with Fauci in 2004. A guy said, if you've had the flu, do you need the flu shot? He goes, no, you got more immunity than you'd ever hope to have. You don't need the flu shot. You've already recovered from it. Our job in this committee is to investigate, to recommend things, and to legislate if possible. And things that we need to do. We're looking at the lockdowns, the closures, the origins of COVID, the effects on the economy, bills that we passed to keep our economy going. Were they helpful? Now, look, we just got a deal to claw back some of that money,
Indeed.
Right? That's a lesson learned there, how we spent too much. But even look at the lockdown and closures, the mental health. Why were the teachers' unions pushing so much for, I'm quoting them in their internal emails, a trigger for closures? Shouldn't the teachers have been saying, we are essential. Kids need to be educated. We need to do everything we can to get back in school. And when they put out guidelines, for example, they wanted to be vaccinated first, the teachers. Okay, we did that as a country. They still didn't go back.
Right.
CDC was going to recommend 3 feet being the distance, right? Okay, they wanted 6 feet.
Throwing science out the window in both cases. 3, 6, 10, 15. You're in a room full of the same air. You're going to breathe in air that's got COVID in it.
But
period.
6 feet. Well, also ignoring that community rates were higher, not the school rates. You were safer in the school, but they wanted 6 feet. Why? Because you can't do it then. If you go to 6 feet, how do you put everyone in the classroom? There's not room. All of these things that just have you raise your eyebrows as to what they were thinking. But the bigger question, why did the CDC accept it? Why did they go with some of the guidelines? Was it based on science? Or was it, this is a political organization? That's fine. You want to reach out to teachers and get their opinions on things, what their fears are, et cetera, et cetera. But why are you accepting things that don't have science behind them?
It's like giving them a veto power at the UN. You know, you may want this, that, and the other thing. Science may dictate that this is the practical reality, but you're dealing with a union that has its own motivations and wanting to lock schools down. They're just going to say no, and that was what they conceded. All right, okay, teachers union say no. We're just going to not open.
And with a certain party in the United States, they have a lot of political power.
Yes, they do, don't they?
I'll give you an example. I'm on Ways and Means Committee. We passed the Secure Act, which was to help people invest in their retirements more easily, and we increased the 529s, which is the savings for your children to go to college, et cetera. We expanded that to homeschool and expanded it to for children with disabilities. We were told by the Democrats that part had to come out, or Nancy Pelosi is not putting this on the floor. So this is a bipartisan bill that we passed out of committee. We had to take that out because the teachers unions didn't like it because it invades on a monopoly apparently, and So we were told that was the reason. So we took it out. We still passed a good bill, as the Democrat chairman said, but we had to take it out. That tells you right there the political power that they have. That's fine. But when it comes to medicine, forget it. I am sorry. When it comes to the health of America, that's not how it should work.
Well, and at least you're a doctor. You can say that with a straight face and with a measure of credibility. You know, Randy Weingartner.
Where's this coming from? School nurses. We had one of the lead school nurse association leaders. She said kids need to be in school. They did need to be in school. The benefits of them being in school far outweighed any of the risks that they were under at that point. And
statistically, children were really not much at risk.
Right.
I mean,
that's what I'm saying. And there was,
unless, of course, they had the vaccine, in which case they may drop dead of a heart attack.
You look at Sweden and other places where the kids were in school, they did fine. And now our children have suffered physically, academically, and mentally.
Well, and Ron DeSantis is kind of running on that very point for the state of Florida, because the state of Florida didn't just drop dead. No, they stayed open, and they seem to have managed.
And Catholic schools were open, so it's not like other schools weren't open. They were.
One more with Congressman Brad Wenstrup. Brad Wenstrup wrapping up a full hour. We've crossed a lot of topics, so I wanted to stick with the COVID conversation, because I understand that you've been seeking some records from the CDC, and they've been a little obstructionist in trying to get them. This is a path that most of the organizations or lettered agencies are going through right now, with all of the Republicans looking into allegations of corruption and fraud and abuse. And as I suggested to you off air, I know James Comer has got the FBI document that he's asking for from the FBI. He's already got it. You know he does. Someone gave it to him. Same thing goes with the CDC information. You've got some of the documents you've asked them for, but you have to go through this dance to formally request it and then have them produce it, or otherwise subject them to a subpoena if they're not. But you know what's in them already, because they're circulating around. What's your take on this?
Well, some of the communications with CDC we have people have alluded to, and we do have documents in other areas of the COVID investigation that we got without requesting them. Yeah, let's just put it that way.
Yes, I understand how that happens.
To keep us on the scent.
Look what I found. Somebody left it laying here.
People give it to us, keep us on the scent. But look, we have June 13th, CDC Director Dr. Walensky coming into public to testify. This took us a good month or so to agree to a date and a time and everything else, and the documents that we've been requesting, which we haven't gotten yet. It's really not been direct contact with Dr. Walensky, who is now decided to resign at the end of the month. But it is the HHS, Health and Human Services, of which she's under, that have been stonewalling us, blocking us, and delaying things. So we're at a better place now. But on March 28th, we sent a letter to Dr. Williams requesting all documents and communications related to the teachers union.
Yep.
Because you see, when we had Janet Weingarten in from the teachers union, she revealed to us that she had been in touch with the Biden transition team once Joe Biden got elected, and the communication started then. So based on that, we want to see what those communications were.
Right.
She did say during that time that it was the Biden administration that reached out to her first, is what she said under oath. We also want the communications between all the communications between the teachers union and the CDC.
Of course.
And really those between the teachers union and the White House and in the executive office of the president. But with Dr. Walensky, it's been very strange because she hasn't been in communication. Look, she came and she communicated when we asked her to with the Republican Doctors Caucus. You know, we didn't agree with a lot of things that she was saying, but, you know, she came forward. But it was the HHS that was telling her, that seemed to be speaking on her behalf. And we would say, we want these 5 documents. And they would say, and this is more anecdotal, we'll only give you these 2. Well, no, it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't work that way.
You know, and that's what I really want to harp on through all of this process. I hope America sees that the agencies that consist of people that were never elected have decided that they get to decide what the American people get to see. That's what our Congress is for.
Right.
And
you are the oversight. You are their lords and masters. You
Yes.
are their bosses. They report to you, and you, of course, via you through the American taxpayer. This is a point that is well taken, Congressman Wenstrup, and I wish we had another hour or 3 to continue our